You're listening to Islamic radio station Radio Noor 810 AM.
Alhamdulillah. Welcome to the English half of the Radio Noor show. In our last show, we heard from Musleh Khan regarding khushu', the idea of concentration and focus and devotion and carefulness, a patient carefulness that we have in how we perform the salah for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And this issue, after Aqidah, really is the highest issue we have in Islam, because the salah is our daily pillar that we are doing 5 times a day, the obligatory salawat, and other prayers besides that. That is the way that we maintain our connection with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and maintain our iman. And the Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam even selected the salah. He let us know the importance of the salah is a barrier between us and disbelief. So this is the actual criteria to maintain ourselves. And once this part of our Islam becomes weaker, then our whole Islam will become weaker. And it's even the first thing we're asked about on Yawm al-Qiyamah. And because we're repeating it, sometimes it's very easy to take it lightly as a routine, the physical actions without the engagement of the heart and the mind, and without the complete focus of the body, the heart and the mind, all for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, who gave us everything that we have, and all of our pursuits go back to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So we want to actually investigate this further. And Musleh Khan has a very long discussion regarding the salah. We already selected a part of it last time. Inshallah, we'll continue with some means of getting more khushu', more patient devotion in our salawat, to remember Allah deeply and to maintain the correct physicality of the salah as well in all of those aspects. So, inshallah, Musleh Khan.
الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله صلى الله عليه وعلى آله وأصحابه أجمعين أما بعد السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. So we are looking at the means of developing the khushu'. And we begun this topic by discussing certain practical steps of how somebody can perform and increase their devotion with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We mentioned that the first one was to prepare perfectly for the prayer. And this entailed a person's wudu and the place of prayer and what they wear. We're going to talk about this further when we get to a particular point relating to it. And we mentioned that perfecting the wudu in and of itself is a way to improve your khushu'. Taking your time and completing the entire wudu. And inshallah, as we continue with this discussion, we will go through all of the steps of the wudu and just make sure that all of us here are on the same page in how much you should wipe up the arms and where you should stop. Does it include your elbows or not? How do you perform certain acts and rituals when it comes to the wudu? So we will go through that as well as part of our discussion. Then in addition to that, we also mentioned that ensure that you pray on time and at the beginning of its time, not in the middle or at the end of that particular prayer time, but try to catch that prayer time when it officially begins. We also mentioned to clear your mind. Try to approach salah with a clear mind. Try to eliminate any distractions and things that might be bothering you in your daily life. In addition to that, remind yourself of Allah Azza wa Jal and His greatness and His attributes. And this is the theme of everything that we've been talking about throughout our discussion, is that you're standing in front of Allah. Salah should remind you of you standing in front of Allah Azza wa Jal on Yawm al-Qiyamah. Some of the ulama, they said that when we will stand on Yawm al-Qiyamah, we will stand shoulder to shoulder. We will stand literally beside each other. There won't be any gaps amongst us. So salah kind of gives you a brief feel or insight to what that might feel like. In addition to that, and this is where we're at today, in addition to improving our khushu', is that we remember that this prayer could be your last. Remember that this prayer could be your last. The Prophet ﷺ, this is one of the things that he always mentioned in terms of perfecting our prayers. Sallu salatan muwaddi'a. Pray as if this is your last and final prayer. So when you do that, what that should cause you is your full devotion, your full attention, your full and complete focus. And the reality is very simple. For some people, the Maghrib that we just prayed, we don't know if that could be the last Maghrib that we just prayed. The Isha that insha'Allah we want to pray, we don't know if that could be the last Isha of our lives. So all of these things here are constant reminders and realities that we try to remember every single time we stand up for prayer. In addition to that is to remember death and the grave during the prayer itself. Remember death and the grave during the prayer itself. So you also want to make sure that you remember all of this throughout the salawat. You also remember that there will also be a time where others may pray over you as well. So all of these things, subhanAllah, are things that should be constantly being reminded to us. In addition to that, remember the benefits of having true khushu'. Now, what's the benefits of being devoted? If a person can master khushu', then they would be devoted in everything they do in their life. So when they go to work, they're going to be focused on their job and their work and everything else that they have to do, those duties. When they go to school, they're going to be mentally focused on school, getting my job done, getting my exams, and studying my work. When they're at home, they're going to be focused on, I have this many chores to do, I have these many responsibilities, I'm going to make sure I fulfill all of them. All of this is as a result of somebody who perfects their devotion and khushu' in the salah itself. This is what we call true khushu'. Another element to that is true khushu' is that in the salah, every single time you feel distracted by something, immediately you try to combat that. You don't just take it easy. You don't just become lazy about it and say, well, as the salah continues, I'm just gonna, it'll eventually go away. You try to combat it immediately at that very moment. So true khushu' is something that you're constantly battling with to make sure that it's always there and it's always firm. Another way or means of developing the khushu' is to think about how the salaf, the pious predecessors, the companions and the early generations of Muslims, how they were when it came to the salah. Some of the salaf, when they stood up in prayer, a person can shoot an arrow and it would strike them, but it wouldn't break them through the salah. They would be that focused in their prayer. Some of the salaf, their focus and their khushu' was at such a high level that nothing, no one, any thought or element that was surrounding them, nothing could deter them when it came to their prayer. They had that much focus and that much attention to the salah. There are certain etiquettes that we're also going to talk about, inshaAllah, of how to prepare yourself to perfect khushu'. There's even a stage before that where you want to prepare yourself before you get to that stage itself, which we will talk about as well. Make sincere dua to Allah Azza wa Jal for His help in achieving khushu' in the prayer. So ask Allah Azza wa Jal to give you the khushu'. This is something you should never shy away from. So in your sujood or even before the prayer or any time you make dua, ask Allah to give you that. In addition to that, pray slowly and calmly with sufficient pauses. Take your time with the salah. The salah of the munafiq is of two types. The salah of the hypocrite is the one that when he or she is in their home, they pray very quickly, just hasten through the salah. They rush to it completely. Whereas the salah of the mu'min and the believer is that the same way that he or she prays at home is the same way that he or she will pray in the masajid. But the munafiq, no. In the home it's one style of praying, But in the masjid, when people are there and people are around, then of course the salah is perfected, or so it seems. So one of the advices of how to improve that khushu is to try to develop some sort of consistency with the prayer itself. Try to develop some sort of consistency that the way you pray wherever you are, whether it's in jama'ah or not, is somewhat similar. Some of the ulama even mentioned that this type of method of praying, where when you're by yourself, you rush through it, but when you're around people, you take your time. The one who rushes their prayer is a salah that is not accepted. But there are certain rules to that. The first rule to know if a person who rushed through their prayer, if it's accepted or not, is the person who hastens through every single movement. The Prophet ﷺ says that when you go into ruku', فَرُكَعْ حَتَّى تَطْمَئِنَّ رَاكِعًا. So go into the ruku' until you feel somewhat peaceful, relaxed. Your bones and your limbs fall into a relaxed position. This literally happens in an instant moment. It only takes a few seconds for you to pause in that position and you have it. Every single one of us know what this feels like. Every single person here, you will know what it feels like when you have that position there. In addition to improving khushu', ponder and think about the beautiful du'as recited before the Fatiha. So this in Arabic is called the sana, where this is one type of du'a. Then there are also other narrations of different things that are recited and said before the Fatiha itself. The moment you say Allahu Akbar, you should be in a state right away. Your focus should be so clear that as soon as you say Allahu Akbar, so many things now become haram for you. You can't smile, you can't eat, you can't talk, you can't do any of them. You fall into this sacred state between you and Allah Azza wa Jal. What's the first thing that comes out of our mouths when that happens? It's only dua, it's only adhkar, it's only verses. In addition to that, think about the verses of the Quran that are being recited and react to their meanings, and try to focus on what type of surah is being recited. So this of course would require some background, some knowledge of the language itself. But even if you don't know the language of the Quran, in other words, even if you don't understand Arabic, so what do you do in this case here? One of the mistakes when it comes to salah is that a lot of people, and I'm sure we've seen this before, you notice when the imam might be reciting, then they'll have somebody beside you who knows the surah, so they start reciting along with the imam. Some of the ulama say that the salah here, that rak'ah for that person is broken. And simply because the job of the imam is not to be repeated or to simultaneously read with him. The job is that for us, those who follow the imam, is we literally follow him. So we listen to him and we let him recite whatever it is that he wants to recite. So it is a highly disliked act to recite along with the imam. Some scholars advise that if you hear a person beside you who is reciting, if you hear a person beside you who is reciting along with the imam, tap him on the shoulder a little bit. Try to just bump him to let him know that this is something that is highly disliked and they shouldn't do that. In addition to that, recite in a slow rhythmic tone in a beautiful voice. This here, subhanAllah, is something that any one of us can implement. Recite beautifully. Make sure, try to beautify your voice. If you like Mashari Rashid, try to imitate him when you're praying. If you like Abu Bakr Shatri, or what's another famous reciter like Sudais or somebody, try to imitate them when you're praying your salah. That's what these reciters are there for. They're there as examples to us. So we try to imitate them. However, for the Hafiz al-Quran, this is just a personal advice to you. For the Hafiz al-Quran, don't try to imitate nobody. Because 99% of the time when somebody does try, the Hafiz al-Quran tries to do that, they lose that natural beauty of their own voice. Some of the ulama, they said that one of the blessings of a Hafiz al-Quran is that Allah gives them a natural voice. that gives them a natural tone. That's why, just look at it, just see for yourself. All those brothers and sisters that memorize the Quran, subhanAllah, this is one of the barakah that comes with the Quran itself, is that when these guys, they recite, they just have a unique tone to their voice like no one else. That's how you got all the Sudaises and the Shuraims and the Mishari Rashids. Where did all of these individuals come from? How did their voice become so beautiful and so eloquent with the Quran? It came with a lot of devotion, a lot of sincerity, and the fact that all of these men and women, they all memorized the Quran. So just keep that in mind. But part of the sunnah is to beautify your voice. And we mentioned this in our discussion of the adhan. The Prophet ﷺ tells us, زَيِّنُوا أَصْوَاتَكُمْ بِالْقُرْآنِ. Beautify your voices with the Quran itself. So this is actually a very, very good sunnah to practice. In addition to that, remember that Allah the Great is paying attention to you, responding to each ayah and to each dua. So again, think about and reflect on what is being recited. Seek refuge with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala from the shaitan. So this happens to you, if this happens to you during the prayer, the sunnah or one of the sunnah acts to eliminate distractions in the salah is to dry spit on your left shoulder 3 times. Now be very careful of how you do this, because some people get very carried away and their dry spit doesn't become dry anymore. Like they really want to attack that shaitan beside them. And it's like one of those things when you see, when you go for Hajj and everybody goes to the Jamarat. Some people, they just get so over emotional when they're at the Jamarat. And I remember we used to see this a lot, that whenever they go to the Jamarat, you're supposed to throw pebbles. Not bricks and stones, but just tiny little pebbles. But you have some people there, like some of the women, they take off their abaya and they throw it inside there, their slippers, their Walkmans, their everything, their iPads, they throw it all inside there just to attack the shaitan at that very moment. So you want to make sure that you do that with some level of maturity and responsibility. Look at the place of prostration. Keep eyes open during the recitation of the Quran. Again, this is a very, very crucial way of improving your khushu'. Keep your eyes focused where you're going to hit down into sujood. Now, some of the ulama, they have 2 ways of doing this. When you're not in front of the Kaaba, you're looking down at the makan of the sujood, the place of sujood. Some of the ulama advised that it was actually mubah and permissible. Imam Shafi'i mentions this as well, Imam Ahmed mentions this as well, that it is permissible for you to stare at the Kaaba if you happen to be directly in front of it. Because the Kaaba in and of itself is a way to improve your khushu', just by looking at it alone. And for those of us who have been to Mecca and you've seen the Kaaba yourself, wallahi, just sitting there, it's very difficult, at least for me, it's very difficult to recite Quran when you're sitting in front of the Kaaba. Because you just always want to look at it. You just always want to admire it. You just always want to stare and say, Subhanallah. And then one of the du'as when you see the Kaaba for the first time is you're saying, La ilaha illallah, Allahu Akbar. You're praising Allah Azza wa Jal for seeing this and to be amongst that circumstance. So it's also permitted for somebody to do this as well when they're standing in front of the Kaaba. You can even see this with some of the imams who lead in Mecca. You can see this even in like the Taraweeh and so on. When they're standing in front of the Kaaba, they're not looking down at the place of sujood. A lot of them are staring directly at the Kaaba itself. In addition to improving our khushu', pray with a barrier close by, an example, a piece of furniture or something. This here, of course, is referring to the sutra. The sutra is a barrier that you place in front of you that protects your place of prayer. What's your place of prayer? It's where you're standing to where your head will touch in sujood. That's your place. It belongs to you. That's your spot. You need to protect that spot. So what do? You place an object, something that spans at least the length of your hand, and it sits there right above the area of your sujood. Some of the ulama, they have a difference of opinion if this is wajib or not. Majority of ulama, the most correct opinion, the most popular opinion with this situation is that the sutra is mustahab. It is highly recommended for somebody to have this. Why? For a number of reasons. Number one is the Prophet ﷺ never prayed except that he had a sutra with him. Secondly, there is a hadith that is a topic of discussion amongst the scholars, and that is the Prophet ﷺ said there is no salah except with a sutra. But scholars, they differ exactly what this means. Is this a command? Or is this a state or a way that the Prophet ﷺ would speak, part of his eloquence in his Arabic? Let me give you an example. If I say to you, you have never visited Toronto unless you go to the CN Tower. That doesn't mean that you've never actually gone to Toronto. It just means that you'll never really enjoy being here and being in the city unless you go to the CN Tower. So what the Prophet ﷺ, according to some ulama, they mention is that hadith here does not entail that your salah is broken without the sutra. What it entails is that you will never taste the full concentration and devotion and khushu' of the salah unless you have a sutra. You see how it ties in together? Why? Because many companions never had a sutra. There are many narrations of companions that prayed without a sutra itself. So the fact that that happened, this is where scholars differ on exactly what that hadith meant itself. Majority of the fuqaha are of this opinion. Majority of the contemporary scholars are also of the opinion that this is highly recommended. But generally speaking, even amongst the scholars of hadith, that's where the ruling is a little more strict. Some of the scholars of the hadith, they said that it is wajib. Take the hadith for what it is and practice it. Wallahi, the best advice I can give is that we always try to pray with a sutra as much as we can. Because the reality is that we always want to perfect our prayer. We always want to make sure that we taste the sweetness of our khushu', and we want to do whatever we can to achieve that. So we try to pray with a sutra as much as possible. A third question to ask is very simple. If you don't pray with a sutra, is your salah accepted or is it broken? So unanimously, if a person doesn't have a sutra, their salah is intact. So that's another reason that this hadith here became a topic of discussion, is because nobody can claim that just because you don't have a sutra that your salah, you need to repeat it over again. So that's how we understand the hadith, and Allah Azza wa Jal knows best. In addition to that, in terms of improving our khushu', is that we reflect on a particular surah that we wish to recite for that particular salah. What do I mean by this? This is a mental preparation, everyone. That when it's time to pray, think about what you want to recite. Don't just jump into the salah and when you get to وَلَضَّالِّينَ, and then whatever surah comes out, that's what you're going to recite. And maybe 99% of the time, it's only قُلْ هُوَ اللَّهُ أَحَدٌ. Allah, I mean, you're just reciting ikhlas for every single salah. I actually know individuals who've emailed me these problems. You know, I remember the one person emailed me and said that they recited Inna a'tainaka al-kawthar for like 3 years straight in every single prayer, in every single rak'ah. You want to know the saddest part about all of this? This person was almost Hafidh al-Quran. Almost. I think they memorized like 20-something juz. But when it came to the salah, it was just this one surah. Why? Because it didn't require any effort on that individual. So they just let it out. This here is a person who has lost khushu'. Think about the surahs that you want to recite. And even if you need to, on your way to the masjid or on your way, as you see the salah time approaching, start to think about it and start to review it in your head. Make sure you can perfect it. What I like to do, honestly speaking, if I'm heading to a masjid, every single time I go to a masjid, I always have at least 2 surahs in my mind that I'm ready to recite if I'm called upon to lead the jama'ah. I always have it immediately. It's always said, it's encrypted in my mind. But what the surahs are, it depends where I go. So for example, a masjid like this one, Masjid Khalid bin Walid, you're not going to just come with your ikhlas and all this. I mean, it's good, no big deal. But in a place like this, it's challenging. Because you have so many huffaz that are in the jama'ah. So you want to make sure that the surah that you pick is a surah that everyone can relate to, including the huffaz themselves. So, I'm always thinking about a particular part of like Surah Hud or Surah Yusuf or something beautiful that the huffaz can relate to, and at the same time the rest of the jama'ah can also know and relate to as well. As opposed to other masajid where I know that the majority of the jama'ah are like old men and women. No, I mean, they might have a hafiz walk in there only for Ramadan or something. So there I take it easy on them. And you want to make sure that the salah is comfortable. You choose some of the shorter surahs that the people can relate to, that the people can enjoy, and that sort of thing. This is just the wisdom and when you become an imam and you lead the jama'ah in salah. As a matter of fact, even in this particular point here, is a very important side point, and that is how long should somebody lengthen the prayer, especially when they're in a jama'ah. There was a narration, there's actually many narrations like this, of two companions who were praying together in the middle of the desert. And this one companion, he was by himself, he started the salah, and he started with Surah Baqarah. And because he started off with Surah Al-Baqarah, another companion saw him praying and decided he wanted to join him. This first companion was reading that surah for so long that it looked like he was going to finish the entire Surah Al-Baqarah in one rak'ah. So before he could finish it, this second companion who joined the prayer, he broke out of it before it finished. Why? Because it was too long. Eventually he went to the Prophet ﷺ and told him what he did. He said, Ya Rasulullah, I saw so-and-so person praying and I joined them, but they were praying so long that I broke out of the salah and then I prayed on my own and completed my prayer. What did I do? Is this correct or not? The Prophet ﷺ actually got angry at the brother or the companion who was praying, who started off the salah first. Why? Because he was the imam. He didn't use any wisdom when he knew that there was a quote-unquote jama'ah behind him. Even though it's just one person, the point is there's someone else there. Part of the wisdom of being a great imam is that you're always looking and you're very careful at the people who are praying behind you. Let me tell you, brothers and sisters, a great imam is the one that would stand in front of the jama'ah, and when he says staw, i'tadilu, atimmu sufuf, and all of these things, he is scanning the entire jama'ah at the same time. And no one would know it except him. And he would look around and sort of have a good idea of what kind of individuals are behind him. If he sees a man sitting on a chair, if he sees another one with a cane, if he sees a person who's all gray, and he sees like a lot of little children running around, immediately what should happen to him? I mean, this is just common sense. Immediately he should think, well, you know what, maybe I won't lengthen the prayer this evening. Maybe I'll make it a little bit shorter just to accommodate what I see that's in the forefront of my eyes at this moment. And then in addition to that, he can't see what's happening in the women's section, but usually the children are there. Usually there's a lot of elderly women as well. So he needs to consider all of that and paint a picture for himself. And that's how he's going to judge the salah, and that's how he's going to pray. So all of these things here are important and crucial when you develop khushu'. It's to use a lot of wisdom when it comes to the prayer. Remove everything from the immediate environment that might distract you. So if you happen to be praying in a room, make sure that the room is somewhat subtle, neutral, that you can pray with ease and comfort. Nothing is going to really distract you when you're in that room as well. Lengthen your ruku' and lengthen your sujood, bearing in mind that this is the closest you can be with Allah Azza wa Jal. The Prophet ﷺ mentions this in an authentic hadith, that this is the closest when we become, or when we fall into the prostration and the sujood. It is the sunnah also to lengthen this period. Lengthen your time with the sujood, especially when you're alone.